What's going on, everybody? We are looking at a pretty red day today if you're talking about Bitcoin, the Bitcoin miners, crypto in general. It looks like after seeing some positive inflows on Monday, we did get outflows on Tuesday. We're going to talk about that. It would have really been nice to see another day of inflows, bringing a little more positive sentiment, a little more hope and enthusiasm into Bitcoin. The reality is these spot Bitcoin ETFs are growing and growing, many with billions of dollars in assets under management, and only going to get bigger and bigger as time goes on. Sure, there will be hitches along the way, but Bitcoin is in now. Bitcoin is not going away. Wall Street has accepted Bitcoin. The SEC has approved spot Bitcoin ETFs. Any fear in previous cycles of government overreach, of government banning things, that fear is completely gone this cycle. It's not even something to think about. It's not even something on people's minds. To me, the landscape for Bitcoin this cycle compared to previous cycles, in my eyes, is much safer. We have some of the largest companies in the world fully embracing Bitcoin. Now, before I get carried away and blab on, we're also going to look at two different miners, very different chart setups. Now, if you guys get something useful out of this, make sure you like, subscribe, ring the notification bell. Check out the links down below if you're interested in any free stocks or cryptos. And first off, let's look at what's going on with Bitcoin. Chart-wise, Bitcoin is still following this sort of a descending channel. We found resistance on it multiple times. We have wrote it down as support a few times. If we do break our 200 MA here, I do think it's possible we come down. And maybe Bitcoin finally breaks 60K, gets into the 50Ks. To me, this would be like buying Bitcoin in the last cycle around $10,000 to $15,000. You got to ask yourself something, is Bitcoin ever going to see 20K again? Is it ever going to see 30K again? How much longer until we never see something like 50K again, 60K again? I do believe 60K is the last cycle's 10K. That doesn't mean we're going to 6x from here, but based on where we are in the timeline, being at 10K last cycle is similar to being at 60K roughly now. Another thing you'll see here as of recently, we had this as a descending wedge, but it did break the wedge to the downside. The market did react to this descending resistance, however, and we did get a bounce off of it, and now it's coming down to retest it. Also, this ascending support we have tested back here in May of 2024. Looks like we're going to test it again here. It was a previous resistance point that we then bounced over, and it became a support. Look at the reaction from the market there. I do think the market is going to react to this trend line. And sadly, spot Bitcoin ETFs did return to net outflows. However, it was only outflows of under $14 million. Grayscale saw a net outflow of $32 million. Bitwise lost $6.7 million. iBit had a $14 million inflow. Fidelity had a $5.5 million inflow. Van Eck reported nearly a $4 million inflow. ARK reported a $2.5 million inflow. So, in reality, this was a very small outflow. And while things have been somewhat negative surrounding Bitcoin lately, we got the Mt. Gox worries, we got Germany selling, apparently USA selling. We have some very negative retail sentiment. Retail is getting extremely bored, and it's very obvious. Look at any messaging boards and you will see that. You got to zoom out and look at the big picture. These spot Bitcoin ETFs have only been live since the beginning of this year. How much money, for example, has iBit pulled in? Nearly $20 billion. $20 billion in assets under management, and this fund has only been live for like 6 months. They're holding 300,000 Bitcoin. Within a couple of years, they'll be holding over 1 million Bitcoin. They'll have over 1/20th of the total Bitcoin supply. And when I mean they, I mean everyone holding iBit. But let's face it, BlackRock is buying its own fund. The thing is, a lot of this Bitcoin is going to be locked up on spot. People are going to buy this Bitcoin with the intention of holding it for the long term. Of course, there will be those jumping in and out, but in general, holdings like iBit will continue to grow in assets under management, and I wouldn't be surprised to see them somewhere around 25 to 30 billion by the end of this year. Maybe 30 billion is a little lofty, but when the hype draws back in, when we start seeing consistent inflows again, when the sentiment comes back, when we see that this Mt. Gox worry is a little overblown, we can quickly start seeing these inflows again. And over the next 6 months, even 50% of the inflows we saw in the first 6 months, this would bring iBit up to about $30 billion in assets under management. It's not unreasonable to think that even if we see 50% the amount of inflows, that would mean iBit holding right around 450,000 Bitcoin, nearly 500,000 Bitcoin, just in the first year of these spot ETFs going live. So make no mistake, in the big picture, Bitcoin is here to stay. It is not going anywhere. If you're looking at Bitcoin as a long-term investor and you're seeing these drops and being worried, you're looking at it completely the wrong way. If you're looking at the short term and you're worried about a drop, of course, this is understandable. If you're new to the market and you just bought and you're seeing your account go down, it's understandable to be a bit worried. But if you understand Bitcoin, if you understand that Wall Street has accepted Bitcoin, these spot Bitcoin ETFs aren't going away. We will overall continue to see net inflows as the years progress. You need to look at Bitcoin and be happy when it drops. For these assets that you have conviction in, for these assets that you believe in for the long term, you should want discounts. Don't let these discounts fear you out. Don't let these discounts worry you. Bitcoin has been accepted already. But let me know what you guys think. If we see a 40K Bitcoin, for instance, would you be panicking or would you be excited? Your answer tells a lot about what type of investor you are. Now I want to look at Iren and CleanSpark. These are two charts with pretty different chart setups. For example, Iren as of late has been running. It's been starting to consolidate, but you know, if you look at the last couple of months, Iren has been running very nicely. When it went to flip this previous resistance as a support, it went to gain roughly another 50% from that break of resistance. One thing you should watch out for is on Iren, the RSI, every time it gets to this level, we do see a retracement. We don't just keep pushing. There is eventually a pullback, there's eventually some consolidation, the RSI resets, and then it goes on its next leg up in this overall bull run. We have seen this before. We get a little overextended and we start retracing. We get a little overextended, we start retracing. But keep in mind, just because the RSI is overbought doesn't mean it's got a pullback right after. For instance, we did get an overbought RSI here to then go and continue to rally, nearly double up. But what do you see here? You see an RSI divergence. You see the price rising, but the RSI dropping. What are we seeing right now? We're seeing a bit of an RSI divergence. The RSI is going lower highs. However, the price is pretty much touching similar highs here. We are getting an RSI divergence. Maybe this is similar to back here in December of 2023, where we saw a really beautiful run. We got an overbought RSI, but then we ran a little bit more. Got that RSI divergence here, and then we sold off a bit. Maybe we do something similar here. While I'm bullish on Iren long term, I would say exercise caution here. DCA if you have conviction in the company. But if you're looking at this more in the midterm or in the short term, if you're looking for a better deal, I do think we will find it with Iren. And follow this longer term trend. You know, it keeps finding resistance here. If we do break out of this resistance, maybe things go crazy, but I personally would expect to see things consolidate a bit. Maybe we come down and test our previous resistance as a support just to confirm. But you know, overall for the rest of this cycle, I do expect Iren to go up and to the right. Of course, there will be dips along the way, but that comes with the territory. The price of riding this ride is riding the volatility. Now I want to show you CleanSpark, a much different chart setup. We have been consolidating for what feels like years, but it's really just been months. While on the short term, these charts are very different. On the mid to longer term, these charts are very similar. They both just continue up and to the right throughout this bull run, ever since the beginning of 2023. And I do expect this to continue into 2025. I'm not sure how long this cycle's bull run will be, but I would expect we will see higher prices in 2025. There are many signs pointing to Bitcoin not at all topping out yet. Over the last few months, CleanSpark has been a swing trader's heaven. You know, you just come down towards this $14, $15 area, scoop some up, and swing it right around anywhere from 18 to 20s. Rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. One thing I like taking advantage of is when these Bitcoin miners get to overbought on the RSI, when they show signs of cooling down, when you get these RSI divergences, etc. Those are great times to either trim a little bit and prepare for a better entry point, or sell some covered calls. And the same thing to the downside. You know, if you're getting a little overextended to the downside, if you're seeing a bullish divergence, if you're expecting a reversal soon, those are usually the times to sell a cash secured put. In my opinion, CleanSpark's more on the side of selling a cash secured put than selling a covered call. For one, when you go over to the hourly, we are pretty dang oversold here. And previously, when we've seen an oversold RSI on CleanSpark on the hourly here, we do see an initial little recovery, and we have seen that before. However, this one we did see a little recovery to then kind of trade sideways and lose a little bit. Typically, you do see a recovery initially. Another thing to think about is, you know, to me, 14 is going to play out as a strong support. It's been a support for months and months. As I've said before, this breakaway gap, it's not showing because we're on the hourly here, but if you look on the daily, there's a breakaway gap from like 10 to 12. I don't expect us to break it. Look up what a breakaway gap is. It is different than a common gap. It is less likely to fill than a common gap. Of course, there's always that opportunity to fill, but I personally don't expect it. That's just my opinion. If you're looking at selling cash secured puts around 14, 13.50 maybe, I think the risk is very limited. Overall, these Bitcoin miners are definitely the stocks to be in. I expect many of these to continue to outperform Bitcoin. Of course, we can't win them all. You definitely want to have a diversified portfolio when it comes to these miners. They are volatile. They do run at different times. I do think it's very beneficial to actually have a few different miners. You will see that they rip and dip at different times. You can definitely take advantage of one by selling calls while selling puts on another, for example. Overall, I do believe these Bitcoin miners are going to be very exciting this cycle. We've already seen some post profitability, which we haven't seen last cycle until the very peak of the bull run, until basically the end. This time around, we already saw it, and I do suspect we'll flip on profitability for the most part because of Bitcoin's drop here and because of the halving cutting rewards. Once Bitcoin gets back into the 70s, into the 80s, many of these Bitcoin miners will be pulling in profits, pulling in money hand over fist, and that is when the hype really draws in. We're dealing with these really high rates right now. Wall Street basically doesn't want anything to do with unprofitable companies, and once these Bitcoin miners start reporting profitability, that will breathe a huge sigh of relief, along with rate cuts, of course. And like I said, once this Mt. Gox fear subsides, once the market realizes, oh, we're not really going to get $9 billion worth of selling, maybe it's a few billion, 2 billion, 3 billion, who knows. Once that fear subsides, I do think Bitcoin will start rallying again. Just got to get through maybe the first couple weeks of July, see that it doesn't have a huge effect on Bitcoin's price, start getting those consistent inflows back from the spot Bitcoin ETFs. And yeah, it should be a very exciting cycle for Bitcoin. In my opinion, it is not too late to be getting in now, but that time is approaching. When we get to 2025, you might want to be a little careful when thinking about getting into these Bitcoin miners, when thinking about getting into a lot of these cryptos. But thanks as always for watching, guys. Let me know what you guys are taking advantage of today. Today's definitely a good day to be a buyer. And if you've been around a while, you know that times like these happen, Remember the 20 to 15K days? So boring. People were feeling like, oh, we're going to go down to 10K. And then what did we do? We went from 15 now to roughly 60 something thousand. I will say this right now, we will never see $15,000 ever again for Bitcoin, ever again, never. One day we'll be saying the same thing about 60K, so take advantage while you can. Thanks as always for watching, guys, and I'll see you on the next one.